The road out of Dry Creek stretched long and unforgiving, cutting through dust in silence like a scar that never quite healed. It was the kind of road people only took when they had no reason left to stay. Emma Carter walked along its edge with a single worn suitcase in her hand, her boots kicking up small clouds of dirt with every step. She didn't look back, not at the town, not at the life she was leaving behind. Not at the memories that clung to every corner of Dry Creek like ghosts that refused to rest. The morning sun had barely risen, casting a pale golden light over the empty land, but even that felt distant, like warmth that belonged to someone else. Emma tightened her grip on the suitcase and kept walking. She had planned this carefully. Leave before anyone noticed, slip out quietly. No goodbyes, no explanations. No chance for anyone to stop her. Because if she hesitated, even for a second, she knew she might not have the strength to go through with it. Dry Creek had taken too much from her already. Years of whispers, of sideways glances, of being judged for things no one had ever bothered to understand. She had learned to keep her head down, to survive rather than live. But something inside her had finally broken. Or maybe it had finally woken up. Either way, she was done staying in a place that made her feel small. The wind picked up slightly, tugging at the loose strands of her hair, carrying with it the faint, familiar sounds of the town waking up behind her. Doors opening, voices murmuring, life continuing as if she had never been part of it. Good, she thought. Let them forget. Let them move on. That was easier than being remembered for all the wrong reasons. She adjusted the strap of the small bag slung over her shoulder and kept her eyes fixed on the horizon. The road curved slightly ahead, disappearing behind a line of low hills. Beyond that, there was something. She didn't know what exactly. A new town, maybe. A new life if she was lucky. Or just more of the same. But at least it wouldn't be here. The sound came faint at first. So faint she almost ignored it. A distant rhythm, steady and familiar, hoofbeats. Emma's steps slowed, just slightly, her grip tightening around the handle of her suitcase. She told herself it didn't matter. It was probably just someone heading out early, nothing to do with her. Still, the sound grew louder, closer, impossible to ignore. She didn't turn around, not yet. Her heart began to beat a little faster. An uneasy mix of irritation and something else she didn't want to name. The hoofbeats came closer, then slowed, then matched her pace. Right beside her. For a moment there was only the sound of the horse breathing, the soft creak of leather, and the crunch of her own footsteps on the dirt road. Then a voice broke the silence. "You planning on walking all the way out of Dry Creek?" It was calm, steady, with a rough edge that came from years of dust and sun. Emma stopped. Slowly, she turned her head. The cowboy sat tall in the saddle, his posture relaxed but his presence impossible to ignore. His hat cast a shadow over his eyes, but she could feel his gaze on her, steady and unreadable. She recognized him, of course. Everyone in Dry Creek knew him. Jake Turner, the man who kept to himself, who worked harder than anyone else, who spoke less than most but somehow said more when he did. He wasn't part of the gossip. He wasn't part of the noise. He was just there, solid, unshaken. Emma frowned slightly. "That's none of your business," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. Jake didn't react. If anything, the corner of his mouth twitched, like he had expected that answer. "Road like this," he said, glancing ahead. "It gets rough past the hills. Not exactly friendly for someone traveling alone." Emma shifted her weight, annoyance rising. "I didn't ask for advice." "Didn't say you did." He paused, then added, "Still giving it." She exhaled slowly, trying to keep her patience. "I'm fine." Jake studied her for a moment, his gaze dropping briefly to the suitcase in her hand, the tension in her shoulders, the way she stood like someone bracing against something invisible. "Doesn't look like it," he said quietly. That hit closer than she liked. Emma straightened, her chin lifting slightly. "I don't need help," she said, "and I don't need company." Jake nodded once, as if accepting her words at face value. But he didn't turn his horse. He didn't leave. Instead, he adjusted the reins slightly and let the horse fall into step beside her again. Emma stared at him. "Are you just going to follow me?" she asked. "Not following," he said. "Riding. Next to me." "Seems that way." She narrowed her eyes. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment, his gaze shifting to the horizon, then back to her. "Because no one should be on this road alone," he said simply. Emma let out a short, humorless laugh. "I've been alone in that town for years," she replied. "This isn't any different." Jake's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Something sharper, more certain. "It is," he said. "Out here, being alone can get you hurt." She shook her head. "I can take care of myself." "I don't doubt that," he said. "Doesn't mean you should have to." The words hung between them, heavier than they should have been. Emma looked away, focusing on the road ahead again. She didn't want to have this conversation. She didn't want to feel this strange pull of being noticed, of being seen in a way she hadn't been in a long time. "Go back, Jake," she said after a moment. "This doesn't concern you." He didn't answer right away. The horse continued at its steady pace, the rhythm of its steps blending with hers. Finally, he spoke. "Everything that leaves that town concerns me," he said. Emma frowned. "Why?" He glanced back toward Dry Creek, now smaller in the distance. "Because I've watched what it does to people," he said, "and I've watched it do it to you." Her steps faltered for just a second, just enough to betray something she would have rather kept hidden. She recovered quickly, her grip tightening on the suitcase. "You don't know anything about me," she said. Jake's voice remained calm. "I know enough." Silence fell again, stretching longer this time. The road ahead seemed endless, the air between them thick with things neither of them was fully saying. Emma kept walking. Jake kept riding beside her, neither of them willing to break first. After a while, the town behind them faded almost completely from view. The hills loomed closer now, their shadows stretching across the road like a warning. Emma could feel the weight of the journey ahead settling in, the reality of what she had chosen becoming harder to ignore with every step. Her arms ached from carrying the suitcase. Her feet were already starting to protest. But she didn't stop. She wouldn't. Not now. Not when she had come this far. Jake watched her quietly, his gaze taking in every small sign of strain, every stubborn step forward. He didn't offer to carry the suitcase. He didn't tell her to stop. He just stayed, steady, present, unmoving in his decision. Finally, as they reached the base of the hills, Emma slowed, not because she wanted to, but because her body demanded it. She set the suitcase down for a moment, flexing her fingers, trying to ignore the dull ache creeping up her arms. Jake reined his horse to a stop beside her. "You don't have to prove anything," he said. Emma let out a breath, shaking her head. "I'm not proving anything," she replied. "I'm leaving." He nodded slightly. "Same thing sometimes." She didn't argue, because a small part of her knew he wasn't entirely wrong. She picked up the suitcase again, determined to keep moving. But before she could take more than a step, Jake spoke again. This time his voice was different. Not just calm, not just steady, certain. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. Emma froze. The words hit something deep, something she had buried under years of pretending she didn't need anyone. Slowly, she turned to look at him. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Jake met her gaze, no hesitation, no doubt. "Because I've seen what happens when people think they have to face everything by themselves," he said. "And I'm not letting that happen to you." The wind moved through the hills, carrying a low, distant sound that made the moment feel suspended in time. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, her thoughts colliding, her instincts pulling her in opposite directions. "Stay guarded. Keep moving. Don't trust this. Don't stop." But another voice, softer, quieter, whispered something else. "Maybe you don't have to run alone." Jake shifted slightly in the saddle, then leaned down just enough for his voice to reach her clearly, leaving no room for doubt, no space for misunderstanding. "Never alone again," he said. And in that moment, standing at the edge of everything she had known and everything she was about to face, Emma realized that this choice, the one she made next, would change everything. The wind shifted across the hills, brushing against her face like a quiet urging she couldn't quite ignore. Her fingers tightened around the handle of the suitcase, knuckles paling as she stood there, caught between the instinct to keep walking alone and the unfamiliar pull of not having to. Jake didn't move. He didn't push. He simply waited, his presence steady beside her, as if he understood that this wasn't a decision that could be rushed. Emma's gaze dropped briefly to the ground, tracing the dusty road that stretched ahead, then slowly lifted to meet his again. "You don't even know me," she said, her voice softer now, less defensive, more uncertain. Jake's answer came without hesitation. "I know enough to see you shouldn't be out here by yourself," he said, "and I know enough to mean what I said." The simplicity of it unsettled her more than any argument could have. There was no persuasion in his tone, no attempt to convince her with empty promises, just a quiet certainty that felt real. Emma exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders loosening just slightly. "And if I say no?" she asked. Jake nodded once. "Then I turn around," he said, "and you keep going. Your choice. No pressure, no expectation, just a door left open." That made it harder. Emma swallowed, her eyes drifting past him to the hills ahead. The road looked longer now, steeper, more uncertain than it had before. Or maybe she was just seeing it clearly for the first time. Alone, it would be harder than she had let herself admit. Alone, everything always was. Her gaze returned to him, searching again, looking for doubt, for hidden intentions, for anything that would give her a reason to walk away without looking back. She didn't find any. What she found instead was something unfamiliar. Steadiness. Not just in the way he sat in the saddle, but in the way he looked at her. As if she wasn't a burden, wasn't a problem to solve, wasn't someone to be judged or fixed. Just someone worth standing beside. That realization hit deeper than she expected. Her grip on the suitcase loosened slightly. "You're not going to try and tell me what to do?" she asked quietly. Jake shook his head. "No." "Not going to expect anything from me?" "No." "Then why stay?" He held her gaze. "Because you shouldn't have to carry everything on your own," he said. "Not if someone's willing to help." The words settled into her chest, heavier than she could explain. For so long she had been carrying everything alone that the idea of not doing it felt almost impossible to understand. Trust wasn't something she gave easily, not anymore. But this wasn't about trust, not completely. It was about choice. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she actually had one. Emma looked down at the suitcase in her hand, then back at the road, then finally at Jake. A quiet decision formed, not all at once, but piece by piece, like something slowly falling into place. Without a word, she lifted the suitcase slightly, then set it down again, not in defeat, but in pause. Jake watched her carefully, saying nothing. She stepped closer to the horse, just enough to close the distance that had been between them since the moment he arrived. "If you're riding," she said slowly, "then I'm not walking." It wasn't a yes, not directly, but it wasn't a no either. Jake's expression didn't change much, but something in his posture eased, like a tension he hadn't realized he was holding had finally been released. "Then we'll make it easier," he said. He swung down from the saddle in one smooth motion, boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. For a moment, Emma just watched him, unsure of what he was about to do. Then he reached for the suitcase, taking it from her without asking, not in a way that felt controlling, but in a way that felt natural, like it was simply the next step. He secured it carefully to the side of the saddle, making sure it was balanced, then turned back to her. "You ride," he said. Emma blinked, surprised. "What about you?" "I'll walk for a bit," he replied. "Horse can carry one of us easier than both, especially on this road." She hesitated. "I can walk." Jake met her gaze again. "I know you can," he said. "Doesn't mean you have to." There it was again, that quiet refusal to make her prove something she didn't need to prove. Emma glanced at the horse, then back at him. Slowly she nodded. He offered his hand, not forcing, not insisting, just offering. After a brief pause, she took it. His grip was firm, steady, grounding. With his help, she climbed into the saddle, settling in with a mix of uncertainty and something else she didn't quite recognize yet. Jake adjusted the reins, then stepped forward, leading the horse along the path into the hills. For a while, neither of them spoke. The rhythm of movement changed, no longer just her footsteps against the dirt, but the soft sound of hooves and the steady pace of someone walking beside her. It felt different, not louder, not more crowded, just less empty. Emma looked down at him after a few minutes. "You always do this?" she asked. Jake glanced up slightly. "Do what?" "Decide things for people without asking." A faint hint of a smile touched his lips. "You had a choice," he said. "Still do." She considered that, then nodded slightly. "Fair enough." The road wound through the hills, the climb gradual but noticeable. The air grew cooler, the silence deeper, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through dry grass. As they moved farther from Dry Creek, something inside Emma began to shift. The tightness in her chest, the constant sense of needing to keep moving, to keep running, it started to ease, just a little. Not gone, but not as sharp. Jake kept his pace steady, never rushing, never falling behind, always there. At one point, Emma spoke again, her voice quieter, more thoughtful. "You really think I can just start over somewhere else?" Jake didn't look back as he answered. "I think you can start wherever you decide to stop running," he said. She absorbed that in silence. It wasn't the answer she expected, but it felt honest. Hours passed as they made their way through the hills, the sun climbing higher before beginning its slow descent. Eventually, the path leveled out, opening into a wide stretch of land beyond the hills. A different kind of quiet waited there. Not the heavy silence of something left behind, but the open, uncertain quiet of something yet to begin. Jake stopped the horse and looked out over the land ahead. Emma followed his gaze. "What's out there?" she asked. "Opportunity," he said simply. She let out a small breath, almost a laugh, though there was no humor in it. "That sounds risky." Jake nodded. "It is." He glanced up at her, his expression as steady as ever. "So is staying somewhere that breaks you." Emma didn't respond right away. She looked out at the horizon, at the unknown stretching endlessly in front of her. For the first time, it didn't feel quite as overwhelming. Not because the road was easier, but because she wasn't facing it the same way anymore. Slowly, she swung her leg over and climbed down from the horse, her boots touching the ground with a quiet sense of finality. She stood beside Jake, not behind him, not ahead of him, beside him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emma took a breath and said, "I'm not going back." Jake nodded once. "I know." She glanced at him. "And I'm not promising anything either." "Didn't ask you to." A small pause, then almost reluctantly she added, "But you can stay." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. Jake's gaze met hers, steady as always. "I wasn't planning on leaving," he said. Emma let out a quiet breath, something inside her settling in a way she hadn't felt in years. She turned back toward the open land, then started walking forward. This time, she didn't carry the weight the same way. Jake walked beside her, matching her pace without needing to be asked. No distance, no hesitation, just presence. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the path ahead, Emma realized something she hadn't thought possible when she first stepped onto that road. She wasn't running anymore. She was choosing. And she wasn't alone. Not anymore.